Welcome back to another Wimbledon video, and this is looking at consumer law and a contemporary issue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I read through a newspaper article and think about how it can apply to legal studies. So this is the syllabus that's open, the options part, consumers option one. And one of the things that I tell my classes is that you want to find an issue that actually straddles more than one syllabus point or more than one syllabus issue. And this is an example of it, and I'll show you what I mean. So online shopping, data hacks, and organized criminals fuel 36% rise in card fraud. So we're seeing an issue that is getting much worse. This is in the Sydney Morning Herald. It's by Jessica Young, just before Christmas 23. Australians are losing more money to card fraud than ever before as scammers and criminals, based mainly overseas, find increasingly sophisticated ways to make payments and transactions using stolen credit or debit card details. So when we're reading an article, the very first paragraph or segment that you read is basically a summary of the whole article. So if you're time poor, read that first one and see if this is relevant to what you're looking for, and if not, move on, because that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So as soon as we see that, I go over here and I think about it and I go, what have we got here? We've got, the developing need for consumer protection, most certainly, and the effectiveness of non-legal and legal responses in achieving justice for consumers. So if they're, being sophisticatedly stolen from, what are people doing about it? So that's my very first thing. And this is obviously a contemporary example because it happened on the 22nd of December 2023. Well, it's being written about. Fraud on payment cards jumped 35.6% to $677.5 million in the 2023 financial year. If you're taking notes, well, straight away, you see that as a very helpful example of some statistics that you can use as evidence when you're writing for this in the HSC or the trial or one of your assessment tasks. So write those numbers down. These exceeding pre-pandemic levels and far outstripping the growth in total spend on Australian cards, which increased 15.4% to $1 trillion. In other words, they're saying it's getting worse. Australians are spending 15% more on cards rather than cash, but this is increasing 35%. And this is according to Australian Payments Network. This is the data. So you can look that up and see who that is, because that would be an example of a non-legal response, people actually collecting data on it so that they can actually help. It comes down to the nexus between fraud scams and cyber breaches that we've been seeing, said AusPayNet head of economic crime, Toby Evans. It's sophisticated, transnational, organised crime. Well, that straight away, when I saw that, had some kind of, not alarm bells, but kind of, oh, hang on a second, bells going off, because if we go back up here in the syllabus, we actually start looking at crime, okay? Here's the crime, the core. This fits into international crime, categories of international crime, transnational crimes, and therefore describing various methods used to deal with it and evaluating the effectiveness of domestic and international legal systems in dealing with international crime. So all of a sudden, this issue hits two syllabus areas. Hits the core in crime, and it hits consumers. The majority, or 90% of the money lost, is being driven by card not present fraud, where the physical card's not needed for a transaction. This year, we lost $608 million on Australian issued cards being improperly used domestically and overseas. Domestically, card not present fraud has actually declined, indicating that Australians are primarily losing money to criminals overseas. Okay, we'll see decline there as an example of kind of the effectiveness of legal measures in achieving justice. So domestically, they're doing better. It's internationally where this is arising. The rise of e-commerce and online shopping has also driven card not present fraud, where payments are processed by inputting card details online, making phishing, so that's kind of pretending to be someone else, scam texts and emails that appear from a parcel delivery company or from a major bank particularly malevolent. We know the data breaches, the cybersecurity attacks on e-commerce platforms, and also from those online shopping scams that your data is stolen, said Evans. Whilst low in value, we know from the work we're doing in our economic crime forum working with police, intelligence agencies, and all the banks, that data will often be used to socially engineer victims to fall for higher value scams. It's a low risk, high reward crime with a very low rate of detection and disruption. So that's helpful, isn't it? Right there. What are we seeing here? We're seeing consumer redress and remedies, kind of the importance of self-awareness. This is people saying you have to pay attention. And then actually the remedies available to consumers, and most importantly, the effectiveness of legal and non-legal measures. So this is saying we've got police, intelligence agencies, and the banks working on this problem. So that's obviously state government, that's federal, that's industry. So role of the media, because this is talking about it, and then individual and societal remedies, trying to fix this situation. Okay, and obviously one of the other things is technology. So all of this is actually happening because overseas they've found these more sophisticated ways of scamming you. And so this is a contemporary issue involving the protection of consumers, and we can evaluate the effectiveness of it by going, what are they actually doing about it, and how hard are they working, and is it actually doing what it's supposed to do? Australian banks have been stepping up efforts to block scams, with the sector last month committing to blocking customers from transferring money if the name listed on the sender doesn't match the details of the recipient. So there's a link. So often what we do when we're reading these things is we click on the link. And here's another article all about what the banks are doing. The financial institutions have responded to growing calls, including from the ACC, to name check transactions and issue notifications. So here's an example from November, a couple of weeks before, okay, just under a month before this article, saying the banks are starting to do stuff. And so this links into it as well, doesn't it? Because they're calling for the ACC, all right? So federal government organisation is pushing the banks, which is an industry organisation, to do stuff, and that falls under the effectiveness of non-legal responses in achieving justice, kind of the role of the law in encouraging cooperation and resolving conflict. So this idea of consumers having stuff stolen and the role of the law, remember that's not just courts, the ACC is part of the law in encouraging cooperation by saying, hey banks, you need to do stuff too. Payments expert and industry consultant Michael Epstein said the figures indicated that current levels of protection for consumers weren't up to scratch. The system's not indicating to the merchant the person using that card is not the rightful owner. As an industry, alarm bells should be ringing. This is a bit of a warning signal. We're talking about chunky amounts of money here. Well, isn't that helpful if you're evaluating this? If you need to evaluate the effectiveness of legal and non-legal measures in achieving justice, Michael Epstein has helped you out immensely here, talking about the industry not doing enough. AusPayNet Evans said scams and fraud were a global issue and would require a cross-industry response between the payments industry, the telecommunications industry, digital platforms, banks, and law enforcement. Well, that's also very helpful, isn't it? Because yes, that tells us a whole bunch of these. It gives us kind of the role of law reform in recognizing the rights of, the effectiveness of legal and non-legal responses, and the role of the law in encouraging cooperation and resolving conflict, because these guys are all going to have to work together. On top of that, though, if you're looking at this, what you're seeing is if you have another contemporary issue about the payments industry or the telecommunications industry or digital platforms or banks, then you can actually bring this in as a secondary issue. So Evans has helped you there by saying these are all the guys that need to work together, which fits a whole bunch of these, but also that means, oh, hang on, I can talk about that when I talk about the telecommunications industry or when I talk about digital platforms. He urged consumers to double check a website was legitimate before checking, by checking for the padlock symbol next to the URL and double checking hyperlinks, okay, which is an example of there, recognizing the importance of awareness and self-help. In recent months, websites such as Beauty Retail Mecca have been spoofed, as in they've pretended to be that website and then not sold stuff. And fake deals for popular brands such as Peter Alexander pajama sets have circulated. Going into the Christmas period, undertaking checks to ensure the online business you're dealing with is legitimate. If it's too good to be true, it is. Okay, and that's finally kind of the self-awareness part here. All right, so here's an example of a contemporary issue which involves a whole bunch of evaluating the effectiveness of both legal and non-legal responses to the problem. It involves consumer remedies, the role of non-government organisations and government organisations, it involves technology, it involves the developing need for consumer protection, it involves the effectiveness of non-legal and legal responses in achieving justice, it talks about the idea of, well, certainly compliance and non-compliance, and also it leads us to international crime as well, transnational crime, and how effectively this is being dealt with. Okay, so hopefully that's a good example if you're doing consumer topic for you to think through and go, yes, I can talk about this in quite a few of my responses. If you found this video helpful in any way, please hit subscribe and you'll see some similar videos coming out very shortly of me talking through contemporary issues for legal studies and how they apply to the syllabus and how you can use these in your responses for trial exams, for the HSE exams, or for assessment tasks. Also, jump onto Wimbledon channel and you'll see a whole range of other videos of different topics for legal studies, how to write essays, how to use contemporary examples, and much, much more.